Deep-sea divers, what are your horror stories? Diving the day before a hurricane on a small South Pacific island, out of nowhere a black and white sea snake, venomous, wrapped itself around my arm. Apparently this happens from time to time before a major storm. They can sense it and look for things that are heading towards the shore so that they don't have to put in so much effort to get out of the sea. As soon as I was in the shallows, it uncurled and headed up the beach where it hid under a breadfruit tree. I thought I was going to get bitten to death by a snake at sea. Turns out I was just a taxi for a very calm but rather rushed reptile. The only scare I've had is some jackbutt in a yacht cruising through our dive location at full throttle. You could hear the boat coming for a solid minute or two before it flew over our heads. Our boat had a dive flag on it and we had a buoy with a dive flag on it. They didn't even slow down. Barracuda, sharks, rays, manatees, dolphins, all cool. Humans are way scarier. Free dove to about 160 feet in Dean's Blue Hole in the Bahamas. It's where a lot of the freediving world records are set. Super neat place, Google a picture. Anyway, I'd never really been past 100 feet freediving, but this was the perfect place to do it. No current, there's ropes to keep you straight and allow a slight pull back up. Scary part is that you become pretty strongly negatively buoyant after like 60 feet, so you're basically hauling butt down while doing nothing and using very little air. So I'm dazed out a bit, feeling good and counting the lines that mark depth, and all of a sudden feel pressure like my trachea is going to collapse, and wake up and realize I've counted to the line that's around 160 feet or so. Very scary moment because I wasn't sure if my body could take the depth or if I had gone too far and wouldn't have enough air to get back up, which is a much slower and more air-intensive process. I'm not a bad swimmer, but diving like that scares me. I just have a tendency to get really disoriented underwater and panic. That scenario sounds like a nightmare I've had a few times. Well, here's my story. I was diving in a local pond with a group of much more advanced divers, cave divers, than I, just an advanced certification at the time. I am leading the dive as to get used to pressure and responsibilities of heading the procession. They are mentoring me. It is a Texas puddle, visibility 10 feet max, not too deep, maybe 25 feet. The known horrible visibility makes it impossible to navigate by compass. We follow a line, string, put by other divers. These lines go from one sunken item to another, so I know I'm about to hit a small sunken boat. I don't remember which one, there are a few similar in a row in the same state of decay. So I am first in the group, I get to the boat and see someone's black army boots sticking out from the inner quarters. Curious thing is, it looks somewhat new, not like items you find on the bottom. Hard to see, too much muck in the water. So I touch the boot thinking it is by itself, but it won't lift, like it's attached to something heavy. I put my hand further in and feel the leg continue out, pants, the calf, and I see the second leg now. Mess with a big letter F, right? I turn around and show a sign for the emergency ascent to the group behind me. Everyone has a sour face. No one wants to surface, but it is a rule that if one says up, others in a group must abort, no questions. They wanted me to explain with signs why, but what is a diver's sign for a cadaver? I feel like I rush towards the surface even though trying to stay calm and take time. So we are on the lake surface. I have this adrenaline rush, can't breathe enough, so I tell them there's a body down there. I see rolling eyes from everyone once they see I am serious. A fun bunch, right? So I describe in detail what I saw. We go down, I don't lead anymore, we make a group search pattern for the line. But once we locate it, we don't know if we should go forward or backwards as there are a number of boats on the line and who knows to which the body is in and how far we drifted while talking it out on the surface. Well, we find all boats before finding the original one, of course. So our customary leader goes into the cabin of the boat and we wait. I'd say he was rather courageous at this point, went right in. Then he emerges from the cloud of muck and tells us all to surface. So, gluing information together from what we learned later on, turns out the police or some other agency had a body recovery training in the same lake the same day. When they went for lunch, they stuffed their fully dressed, anatomically correct rubber doll in one of the sunken boats for a few hours for safekeeping. Well, I died a little that day. Oh man, even though it absolutely was not your fault, and who could blame you for reacting the way you did, I cannot help but just know that you got a nickname out of that event. Diving Dummy or Cadaver Curtis or something, right? Saved someone from drowning while scuba diving. Person had an epileptic seizure at 85 feet of water in a pitch black cavern that I was diving also. I was hovering above just watching the flashlights move about when I noticed one flashlight not moving. I swam down and met with the other diver with no regulator in their mouth, eyes open and just on their knees. The diver's buddy was next to them and in complete shock to what was going on and was not assisting whatsoever. 15 years of diving and instructor training came over me like it was second nature. I thought her regulator just came out, so I popped mine out and offered it to her. That's when I noticed she had done mentally checked out. I popped my number 2 regulator in my mouth and attempted to put my number 1 regulator in her mouth, but her teeth were completely clenched. I then pressed the purge button to get air into her mouth and noticed her cheeks moving, so I know air was getting in there. That was good enough for me. I then grabbed her under her arm and get the regulator flowing in her mouth and swam to the opening of the cavern and then up over 60 feet to get her to the surface. Once on the surface, did everything I was trained to do. Inflate BC, dumped her weights, got her on her back, and started towing to land. As I'm towing her in, she is regurgitating all the water she swallowed and inhaled. It seems like gallons of water. Got her to land where other divers assisted me in getting all her gear off. She was breathing fine and alive, but in shock for a while and slowly came around like nothing happened. We were very lucky that we were only 10 minutes into the dive. For sure, we would have both been bent and spending time in a hyperbaric chamber. The crazy thing is, she didn't tell anyone she had epilepsy, and when we later reviewed her consent form, she checked off no to epilepsy. I put myself at risk shooting up to the surface like that, but if I came across that situation again, I would not hesitate to save someone's life. Night diving is incredibly creepy. You don't realize how dark the ocean is until you are in it. The Byford Dolphin Diving Bell Accident. Long story short, some divers came up from an extremely deep dive at an oil drilling rig and someone messed up the decompression procedure and opened the door while the chamber was still pressurized at depth. The 4 divers were instantly killed, and the one nearest to the door literally exploded and they found bits of his body all over the oil rig. So next time someone tells you that people don't explode in decompression chambers like you see in the movies, tell them they're wrong. Holy crap! I knew there was a lot of pressure and stuff with diving, and you hear about the bends, but I didn't know that was possible, and I definitely don't want to do research to find out more. I did a shipwreck night dive on New Year's Eve one year, and it was spooky as hell. 80 feet down, really small plane. Visibility was obviously not great. I've only done this one night dive. So these slow-moving fish would come looming out of the dark. Scarier to me was getting back on the boat because it got really stormy. You'd be looking up at the ladder and it'd come crashing down right next to you. The waves were crazy. My brother got hit by the ladder, but not too badly, and we all managed to get back okay. I know it's not really what you're looking for, but none of the other stories so far are even close. My story about my parents. They like to scuba dive when traveling and have gone several times over the years. Once they visited Mexico and went diving there before I was born. I'm not sure where they were exactly, but my mom was slightly lower down than my dad and looking at the ocean floor. He was looking up and around. My mom had on a gold necklace that was floating in the water around her. It was a sunny day and a fairly shallow dive, so it was sparkling. From my mom's point of view, she was going along, having a grand old time looking at the sea critters below, when suddenly my dad grabbed her and started frantically shaking her arm to get her attention. She looked up, and a barracuda was directly in front of her, closer than was comfortable, and staring intently, scary teeth on full display. It was focused on the shiny necklace and was just hovering there transfixed. She slowly moved up her hand to cover the necklace and then slowly and calmly moved away from it, and it took off without bothering them anymore. But still pretty unsettling and taught my mom to be a little more aware of her surroundings when diving. I got the bends once. I was careful, followed my chart to my computer, had appropriate depths and surface time, but I didn't drink enough water, so I was all out of whack. Felt fine until I got home, mild headache. Then I woke up and it was just pain in my left arm, elbows, fingers, couldn't even bend them without bad pain. My headache was intense and I was so dizzy. Called my older, more experienced dive buddy and I got rushed to the hospital. Docs got me hooked up in fluids, checked my dive logs while the decompression chamber was set up, and then got me in there with a nurse. 8 hours in a tube about the length of a car but as wide as maybe a double bed. I was on oxygen and hooked up to an IV, and it was so loud with all the air rushing in. As soon as I got to depth, the pain vanished. It was crazy. I'm fine now, obviously, but I wasn't allowed to dive for a month, which sucked, but hey, the dives were pretty great. I wear heavy prescription lenses and can't wear contact lenses. Halfway through a week-long live board dive trip, someone dropped a tank on my prescription mask and shattered it. I usually had a second set with me but could not find them and only brought one because, hey, nothing had ever happened before. I am functionally blind without corrective lenses. I can see color and that's about it, starting about 5 inches from my face. I was devastated but decided to go diving anyway with my husband as my seeing eye diver. I could see my gauges, so I felt reasonably safe. It was among the most amazing 3 days of diving I've ever had. I saw the colors, shapes, and movement without being focused on the details. I actually took many of the best underwater photos I'd ever taken. I wasn't worried about focusing on a particular coral or fish. I was looking at the larger color patterns. So it didn't turn out to be the disaster I thought it was. Wow, I thought this story was going to take some scary, blind-in-the-water turn of events, but this was kind of beautiful in a way. Now I just wish I could see those photos. I dive a lot, several times a week. My area has a lot of theoretically dangerous things. Sharks and barracudas, morays and stingrays, blue-ringed octopuses, cone snails, box jellies, siphonophores of all kinds, sea snakes, stonefishes and scorpionfishes, venomous catfish, crown-of-thorns starfish, and various sea urchins that can hurt you in several different ways, titan triggerfish, and so on and so on. But only one thing has ever got me. Twice. Are you ready? Clownfish. Like Nemo. They are territorial and brave and will get in your face if you're near their anemones. I usually respect their space, but I was distracted watching something else a couple of times, and turns out they will actually bite you if you don't leave their space fast enough. For real though, I don't have particular horror stories, but the scariest moments are probably when I get caught in strong currents and have to crawl on the bottom to fight it, going hand over hand like I'm climbing a horizontal wall. Despite what a lot of people tend to think, especially looking at the daunting list of dangerous animals in my area, sea critters aren't your problem. You leave them alone and it's fine. Sea conditions like waves or currents, and above all human error, are the real killers. Edit. I just remembered an incident that did scare me. It was a human error/equipment failure issue. When you're diving, you want to ascend to the surface slowly. This is because under pressure, your blood and tissue can hold more gases. In particular, inert nitrogen from your compressed air, dissolved in it than when you're at the surface. And you ascend to the surface, these dissolved gases have to return to being gases. If you're slow, you just breathe it out as you come up, but if you're too fast, they'll turn into bubbles of gas in your arteries and veins before they can be vented out. This causes embolisms as well as decompression sickness, aka the bends. I was diving with a friend at about 25 meters, 82 feet, when her old beat-up BCD, the vest that you can inflate with air to control your buoyancy, started to inflate on its own. This has happened to me before as well, but I just disconnected the air hose from the BC immediately and carried on, and went on to do about 10 dives with a busted BC that I only inflated manually. She didn't think to do that, or didn't have time to do that. This happened very quickly. I saw that she was having buoyancy control issues. She was upside down, kicking to try to stay down, but in the few seconds it took for me to realize how bad the problem was, she was already at the surface. Basically, I quickly glanced around to see if there was a rock I could use to weigh her down, and when I turned back, she was gone. I followed her up, but not too quickly, and even so, my dive computer was beeping warnings at me. When we met up, I wondered why she didn't use her dump valve. There's a valve at the bottom of these BCs exactly for releasing air when you are feet up, especially since she was experienced and should know to do that. Then I saw the string you pulled to open the valve was missing, so it was literally impossible to dump the air when oriented that way. So check your gear before you use it. I was pretty worried that she would come down with the bends, but she was fine. People often worry that I dive alone a lot, but honestly, all of my scariest and most anxious moments were problems occurring with other people. That right there is the reason I don't think I want to try diving. I am just great about forgetting to check stuff, and I would always be way too worried that I forgot something. Probably rightfully so. Throwaway account, as this story is well known among my circles and it would be easy to identify me. I grew up in Oz. When I was 15, I took the family boat out and dove the reef myself to clear my head. Mistake number 1. I was down at a depth of about 28 meters, 90 feet, when I was only rated for 60 feet. Mistake number 2. Whilst diving, I spotted a 3.5 meter mako shark coming right at me. For those who are unaware, makos are basically the cheetahs of the ocean, and they only have 2 speeds: curious, harmless, and lunch, very much harmful. This guy was in lunch mode. So I hovered as I had been trained to do, as there would be no way for me to outmaneuver it or escape it. Nowadays, we dive with shark shields, which emit electronic pulses that freak the sharks out and keep them away, but back then, what we used was essentially a chainmail sleeve. The idea being that sharks hate the taste of metal, so if you give it your arm, it'll bite down, decide you're gross, and move along. So I wait, and it comes, and I do a perfect move to give the beastie my arm. Just before the crunch, however, it occurred to me that I had left my sleeve on my bed. Mistake number 3. I had my kelp knife drawn and stabbed it right as it bit me. It swam off and I was alive, however, now I had a series of problems. 1, I had a huge open gashing wound on my arm from the bite in open water and I was trailing blood everywhere. 2, once the shock wore off, you realize that you're in salt water and salt in open wounds doesn't feel good. 3, in a panic, I dropped my weighted belt and shot up to the surface without any sort of waiting period. Hello, bends. Mistake number 4. 4, because I hadn't been paying attention to the currents, I was approximately a quarter-mile downstream of my boat, which means I had to swim up to it. Mistake number 5. 5, when I got to the boat, I really started to wish I had done as my dad had said and had the comms fixed. Mistake number 6, or that I had upgraded the first aid kit like I had been threatening to do. Mistake number 7. So, I ended up racing back to shore with nothing more than a tourniquet to staunch the bleeding. Long story short, my series of unfortunate self-inflicted events earned me 172 stitches, boatloads of physical therapy because the shark had actually bitten down on my tricep and detached it, and easily identifiable scars on one of my arms for the rest of my life. Oh, and I lost my deceased grandfather's favorite kelp knife that he had left me. Oh my God, that is a lot of dangerous mistakes, and the number of stitches tells me all I need to know. But hey, you made it out alive, and I'm glad to hear that at least. Sorry for everything else, though. My biology teacher told us that she once was swimming in the south of the Philippines because she was trying to find an elusive seahorse, and she went quite deep at night when they are more active, and she got attacked by a shark and her team got out fast. The next day, they found a turtle that was bitten in half, shell included, that was pretty big, and it's supposedly the last time she went diving in that area. Not me, but my brother, and not deep sea. Sorry. He was 18, part of the dive club at his school. They went on a diving trip. The crew that handled the dive counted heads wrong, and halfway through the dive, the boat went back to shore without them. So there they were, 2 kilometers from shore, with their only option to swim back. There were about 5 of them, 2 girls, 3 guys, all of them between 15 to 18 years old. About halfway through, one of the girls couldn't swim anymore and started crying. My brother, along with another guy, swam with her, dragging her along, making sure she didn't drown. Everyone made it out okay. Worst part, school tried to hide it and had the audacity to suspend my brother from school for catching him with a beer while on the trip. Needless to say, they were in deep crap when it came out. Not sure exactly what happened, though. Honestly, the things that really scare me, makes my heart run faster, etc. are 2. If my air consumption looks funky, suggesting a leak, or the current is suddenly fast, basically anything that could lead to a life-threatening issue due to running out of air. When you're deep, you can't just fly back up and be fine. Hurting reefs. Like honestly, if my hand brushes against one, even dead, or gets super close to the dust unsettles because of the current or something, I feel so guilty. Was doing a boat dive and came up to find 20-foot swells. We just had to chill for a while down under until the boat would calm down and we could actually grab the ladder without getting smashed. I remember seeing the ladder go up and down 6 to 8 feet at a time. I finally grabbed the rope and climbed up as fast as I could. I hung onto the ladder and the boat crew grabbed my BCD and hauled me out of the water and onto the swim step. Half the divers puked on the way back into port. That was the roughest conditions that I have ever been diving in. There is just no part of the ocean that wants humans in it, you know? Like, every bit about it says, stay out. But man, when you see the pictures and videos of what people see down there, I can't blame them for going in. I never would, but I'm glad they do. My family got certified while I was in high school. Our last dive was open water. We decided we would do it on vacation. All other dives were in the States in a pool. Wreck dive about 200 yards offshore. Not sure why, but Mom's tank went empty way faster than everyone else's while we were out at sea. She didn't realize it until it was less than 5%. We surfaced and started swimming back, but she panicked. She was an experienced swimmer and snorkeler, but she couldn't handle it with the other scuba gear. We whistled for help, and the locals thought we were just being tools, didn't realize she was struggling. We kept her up and got her back. Finally, about 50 yards out, they realized we were towing in a diver in distress. Everything turned out okay. I haven't been scuba diving since. My brother went on to become a dive master. Sorry, not really a deep sea dive. I'm hardly a deep sea diver. My deepest dive to date is 111 feet. This incident actually occurred in about 8 feet of water, Crystal River, Florida. Known for attracting manatees in the winter. They don't let you scuba dive there anymore, and the dive master suggested snorkeling this dive because it was shallow and it scares off the manatees. It was my first set of dives out of certification. I was putting my gear on, damn it. So, there's 2 manatees in the immediate area, an older juvenile who was hanging out and loving the attention from the snorkelers and what we assumed was likely his mother. I had a little disposable underwater camera. As soon as I hit the bottom, the big one approached me. I moved the camera out of my face and she just got closer and closer until she literally grabbed my regulator out of my mouth. Luckily, my skills were still very fresh in my mind and I calmly grabbed my octo, but I spent the entire drive trying to get far enough away to get pictures of her. She was a nosy pest. I wear contacts, so getting water in my mask is extremely bad as I can't open my eyes underwater. Shortly after being told about a shark colliding with my friend from behind and removing his mask, I'm pretty scared about this, not sharks in general. And I see a shark heading for me. They are curious, they often shoulder bump you as they turn at the last second, but she wasn't changing course. I stayed calm and still as long as I could, and at the last second before she hit my mask, I ducked. Except instead of ducking under, I just headbutted her right in the nose. Everyone saw and thinks it was the funniest thing ever. I may be the only person alive who headbutted an 11-foot shark in the nose, but it was because I was scared she would take my goggles off. I say lean into the mythos and just tell the story of, yeah, shark was coming right at me, so I just stared her down and headbutted the beaut. That taught her a lesson. The weather had been pretty hot and the water temp was also around 26 degrees Celsius. We'd done a dive and a long swim in the morning. We then headed out for our second dive and the boat dropped us in the wrong spot. So we had to swim against a massive current to get out to our intended site. Halfway into the swim, I just felt like I needed a nap. And so I closed my eyes and did exactly that. It felt so peaceful. I immediately dropped down to an even deeper depth and was lucky that one of my guys on the dive turned around at that moment and saw what was happening. He swam as fast as he could towards me and caught me. He asked if I was okay, I said I was, and passed out again. This time spitting my rig out and started blowing bubbles. He then went behind me, shoved my rig back in, wrapped his arms around me, and took me straight to the surface. He saved my life. Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.